Chapter 10, Sanditon by Jane Austen. It was not a week since Miss Diana Parker had been told by her feelings that the sea air would probably, in her present state, be the death of her. And now she was at Sanditon, intending to make some stay, and without appearing to have the slightest recollection of having written or felt any such thing. It was impossible for Charlotte not to suspect a good deal of fancy in such an extraordinary state of health. Disorders and recoveries so very much out of the common way seemed more like the amusement of eager minds in want of employment than of actual afflictions and relief. The Parkers were no doubt a family of imagination and quick feelings, and while the eldest brother found vent for his superfluity of sensation as a projector, the sisters were perhaps driven to dissipate theirs in the invention of odd complaints. The whole of their mental vivacity was evidently not so employed. Part was laid out in a zeal for being useful. It should seem that they must either be very busy for the good of others or else extremely ill themselves. Some natural delicacy of constitution, in fact, with an unfortunate turn for medicine, especially quack medicine, had given them an early tendency at various times to various disorders. The rest of their sufferings was from fancy, the love of distinction and the love of the wonderful. They had charitable hearts and many amiable feelings, but a spirit of restless activity. And the glory of doing more than anybody else had their share in every exertion of benevolence. And there was vanity in all they did, as well as in all they endured. Mr. and Mrs. Parker spent a great part of the evening at the hotel, but Charlotte had only 2 or 3 views of Miss Diana posting down the down after a house for this lady whom she had never seen, and who had never employed her. She was not made acquainted with the others till the following day, when, being removed into lodgings, and all the party continuing quite well, their brother and sister herself were entreated to drink tea with them. They were in one of the terrace houses, and she found them arranged for the evening in a small neat drawing-room with a beautiful view of the sea if they had chosen it. But though it had been a very fair English summer day, not only was there no open window, but the sofa and the table and the establishment in general was all at the other end of the room by a brisk fire. Miss Parker, whom, remembering the 3 teeth drawn in one day, Charlotte approached with a peculiar degree of respectful compassion, was not very unlike her sister in person or manner, though more thin and worn by illness and medicine, more relaxed in air and more subdued in voice. She talked, however, the whole evening as incessantly as Diana, and accepting that she sat with salts in her hand, took 2 drops 2 or 3 times from one out of the several phials already at home on the mantelpiece, and made a great many odd faces and contortions. Charlotte could perceive no symptoms of illness which she, in the boldness of her good health, would not have undertaken to cure, but by putting out the fire, opening the window, and disposing of the drops and the salts by means of one or the other. She had very considerable curiosity to see Mr. Arthur Parker, and having fancied him a very puny, delicate-looking young man, was astonished to find him quite as tall as his brother, and a great deal stouter, broad-made and lusty, and with no other look of an invalid than a sodden complexion. Diana was evidently the chief of the family, principal mover and actor. She had been on her feet the whole morning on Mrs. Griffiths's business or their own, and was still the most alert of the 3. Susan had only superintended their final removal from the hotel, bringing 2 heavy boxes herself, and Arthur had found the air so cold that he had merely walked from one house to the other as nimbly as he could, and boasted much of sitting by the fire till he had cooked up a very good one. Diana, whose exercise had been too domestic to admit of calculation, but who, by her own account, had not once sat down during the space of 7 hours, confessed herself a little tired. She had been too successful, however, for much fatigue, for not only had she, by walking and talking down 1,000 difficulties, had at last secured a proper house at 8 guineas per week for Mrs. Griffiths, she had only opened so many treaties with cooks, housemaids, washerwomen, and bathing women that Mrs. Griffiths would have little more to do on her arrival than to wave her hand and collect them around her for choice. Her concluding effort in the cause had been a few polite lines of information to Mrs. Griffiths herself, time not allowing for the circuitous train of intelligence which had been hitherto kept up, and she was now regaling in the delight of opening the first trenches of an acquaintance with such a powerful discharge of unexpected obligation. Mr. and Mrs. Parker and Charlotte had seen 2 post-chaises crossing the down to the hotel as they were setting off, a joyful sight, and full of speculation. The Miss Parkers and Arthur had also seen something. They could distinguish from their window that there was an arrival at the hotel, but not its amount. Their visitors answered for 2 hack chaises. Could it be the Camberwell Seminary? Mr. Parker was confident of another new family. When they were all finally seated, after some removals to look at the sea and the hotel, Charlotte's place was by Arthur, who was sitting next to the fire with a degree of enjoyment which gave a good deal of merit to his civility in wishing her to take his chair. There was nothing dubious in her manner of declining it, and he sat down again with much satisfaction. She drew back her chair to have all the advantage of his person as a screen, and was very thankful for every inch of back and shoulders beyond her preconceived idea. Arthur was heavy in eye as well as figure, but by no means indisposed to talk, and while the other 4 were chiefly engaged together, he evidently felt it no penance to have a fine young woman next to him, requiring in common politeness some attention, as his brother, who felt the decided want of some motive for action, some powerful object of animation for him, observed with considerable pleasure. Such was the influence of youth and bloom that he began even to make a sort of apology for having a fire. "We should not have one at home," said he, "but the sea air is always damp. I am not afraid of anything so much as damp." "I am so fortunate," said Charlotte, "as never to know whether the air is damp or dry. It has always some property that is wholesome and invigorating to me." "I like the air too, as well as anybody can," replied Arthur. "I am very fond of standing at an open window when there is no wind, but unluckily a damp air does not like me. It gives me the rheumatism. You are not rheumatic, I suppose?" "Not at all." "That's a great blessing, but perhaps you are nervous?" "No, I believe not. I have no idea that I am." "I am very nervous. To say the truth, nerves are the worst part of my complaints, in my opinion. My sisters think me bilious, but I doubt it." "You are quite in the right to doubt it, as long as you possibly can, I am sure." "If I were bilious," he continued, "you know wine would disagree with me, but it always does me good. The more wine I drink in moderation, the better I am. I am always best of an evening. If you had seen me today before dinner, you would have thought me a very poor creature." Charlotte could believe it. She kept her countenance, however, and said, "As far as I can understand what nervous complaints are, I have a great idea of the efficacy of air and exercise for them. Daily, regular exercise, and I should recommend rather more of it to you than I suspect you are in the habit of taking." "Oh, I am very fond of exercise myself," he replied, I mean to walk a great deal while I am here. If the weather is temperate, I shall be out every morning before breakfast and take several turns upon the terrace, and you will often see me at Trafalgar House." "But you do not call a walk at Trafalgar House much exercise?" "Not as to mere distance, but the hill is so steep. Walking up that hill in the middle of the day would throw me into such a perspiration. You would see me all in a bath by the time I got there. I am very subject to perspiration, and there cannot be a surer sign of nervousness." They were now advancing so deep in physics that Charlotte viewed the entrance of the servant with the tea things as a very fortunate interruption. It produced a great and immediate change. The young man's attentions were instantly lost. He took his own cocoa from the tray, which seemed provided with almost as many teapots as there were persons in company. Miss Parker, one sort of herb tea, and Miss Diana another, and turning completely to the fire, sat coddling and cooking it to his own satisfaction, and toasting some slices of bread, brought up ready prepared in the toast rack. Until it was all done, she heard nothing of his voice, but the murmuring of a few broken sentences of self-approbation and success. When his toils were over, however, he moved back his chair into as gallant a line as ever, and proved that he had not been working only for himself, by his earnest invitation to her to take both cocoa and toast. She was already helped to tea, which surprised him, so totally self-engrossed as he had been. "I thought I should have been in time," said he, "but cocoa takes a great deal of boiling." "I am much obliged to you," replied Charlotte, "but I prefer tea." "Then I will help myself," said he. "A large dish of rather weak cocoa every evening agrees with me better than anything." It struck her, however, as he poured out his rather weak cocoa, that it came forth in a very fine dark-coloured stream. I shall continue this chapter in the next video.